and welcome to Bible 365 with Kathy Carter. So I'm starting today right away. I have 3 points. I normally don't do this, but these things really stood out to me. So I want to start with my 3 points, and then I will go into all the introduction stuff. So the things I'm going to talk about today is point 1, physical touch. That's one of the things I'm going to discuss today. Point 2 is my heart grew 3 sizes that day. So I'm hoping you're going to remember these things. And point 3 is it's not black and white. So those are my kind of major points for today. And what's funny is they're not any of them in the first chapter. They're all in chapters following that. But those are the things that I want to discuss. They kind of blew up to me today because that's just the way things work sometimes. But before I go into any of those things, I'm just going to go do a quick introduction that this is Bible 365 with Kathy Carter, and that's me. And I am doing the 1 Year Chronological Bible reading plan. And so if you want to find that online, it's the 1 Year Chronological Bible online. And you can download a free reading plan. And I'm reading through the Bible in 1 year. So I'm trying to do anywhere between 3 and 4 chapters every day. Again, it goes with that reading plan, and just sharing my thoughts with you guys. And so this is mostly for me because it's like a video journal kind of to help me with my faith. But this is partially, I think, a teaching. I think I try and keep us on track with where we are and what's happening and who I see God to be in these things. But it's also pretty personal. And so today there's going to be some personal things that go along with it because these are the things that light up to me in the ways that I need to follow the Lord more. So I see who he is, and then I see ways in which I'm lacking in certain things in following him, right? So like I can say my faith is strong, but I'm actually following him and doing the things that he's asking me to do because I have faith. So it's all great just to say like, oh yeah, I believe that Jesus lived and died and took my sins away and was resurrected again. But what does that matter in my life? And so this is changing my life. And I think every day I do it, I feel changes in my life. So I just want to share some of those things with you, and that's where they're coming from today. So we're quickly going over where we were. This is Moses. This is the end of Moses's life. Like literally, quite literally, we're finishing Deuteronomy today, and we're moving into the book of Joshua because Joshua takes over for Moses. Moses has taken the people of Israel from slavery all the way into the outside edge of the promised land with a promise. Again, it's promised land because it's promised. It's a land that's been promised to them back in Genesis. And so he's taking them now on the outskirts of what we would consider the promised land. And he's going to, after Moses dies, he's going to move them into the promised land. And so Moses has taken them every step of the way. Moses has been their leader. He has been their judge. He's been their king, actually, which is one of the things that it says in here, which I found really interesting because I didn't think of him in that way. And so he's been the head of the Israelite people. He's also been the voice of God to them. And so God has been speaking through Moses, and then Moses has been sharing it with the people of Israel. And so they're going to move the tent of meeting or tabernacle, God's house, into the land of Canaan, the promised land for them. And they're going to worship God there. And God's going to continue to meet with his people. So they built the tabernacle in order for God to meet with them. So that's where we're starting off today. And we're starting off with Moses's blessing. And so moving right into the beginning, and just a couple things highlighted to me, but this was great, but I didn't really see a lot of, nothing really sparked a lot to me. So this is Deuteronomy 33, and in verse 1 it says, this is the blessing that Moses, the man of God, pronounced on the Israelites before his death. So he just reminds them in the beginning of this blessing of who he is, right? The Lord came from Sinai and dawned over them from Seir. So this is where God met with them. And he loves the people. He loves his Israelite people, the ones that he picked and he chose. And it says that Moses is the one that God gave these laws to. So, and then in verse 5, it says he was king over Jeshurun. Remember, we saw this just yesterday for the first time. And so this is essentially the name of the Israelite people. This is another name given to the Israelite people, the Jeshurun, when the leaders of the people assembled along with the tribes of Israel. And so now to each son, each person of the 12 tribes, he gives this little blessing to. And so Reuben doesn't get a whole lot. He just says, let Reuben live and not die. So that's good. And he has a lot of people. And then he immediately goes into Judah. And so there's just not too much, but just a couple of things in Judah. In Judah, he cries out to defend his cause. So he wants the Lord to help him defend his cause. And then he goes right to the Levites, I think, are right after that. So that's in verse 7. He talks about Judah. And in verse 8, he talks about the Levites. And what I found interesting about the way he talks about the Levites is that this could sound really, really negative. And that's why I wanted to point it out, because it says, the Thummim and Urim belong to your faithful servant, Levi, the Levites. You tested him at Massa. You contended with him at the waters of Meribah. He said of his father and mother, I have no regard for them. He did not recognize his brothers or acknowledge his own children, which sounds terrible. However, in that verse that follows, it says, but he watched over your word and guarded your covenant. So his main job, and then it says he teaches the people of Jacob and the people of Israel. His main job was not to be tribal in some ways like the other tribes were, but his main job was, and I say his, it's all the descendants of Levi. So talking about him, Levi the son, who actually isn't alive anymore, but it's all of his descendants, the tribe of the Levites, are there and meant there, which we've been reading over chapters, to take care of the word of God and to teach the word of God, to hold it close and to learn it and then to teach it to the people after. And so that's really their main job. And so the fact that they're turning away from mother and father is good. What it means is they're turning towards God. So that means God is their main focus and their main identity. They have nothing beyond that. All right. And then he says, and then he talks about Benjamin, and Benjamin is, it seems like Benjamin might be a tribe where they go to war, right? They're the ones that protect. And I think they were the ones all the way in the back that protected sort of the flanks of the Israelite people. So it says he shields them, right? That they're the beloved and that they rest in the Lord. And then he goes on and on about Joseph, who, if you guys remember in the book of Genesis, Joseph gave his two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. They're the ones who actually have the tribes, but I find it interesting that he actually goes back and he blesses Joseph, even though in the end of this, he does talk about Ephraim and Manasseh. And so Joseph gets all kinds of blessings, physical blessings, right? Food blessings, where they live, all these really good blessings. They're going to be a lot. They're going to have a large tribe, and so they're a highly blessed two sets of tribes of God's people. Zebulun is next, and it's so funny because Zebulun and Issachar are kind of together. It's really as exciting as Reuben's. It says, "Rejoice in your going out," and Issachar rejoice in your tents. So that's not, I guess they're going to be a more of a moving people, and then he moves on to Gad. And then Gad's domain is going to get bigger. So he has the best land. And then he moves on to Dan. Daniel is a lion's cub springing out of Bashan. Naphtali is abounding with a favor. He's going to live towards the lake. So again, we're just kind of talking about locations. And then he talks about Asher. So Asher looks like is going to be rich. Asher is, and again, I'm just kind of going off of what I say. He's going to be favored by his brothers. He's bathing in oil, iron and bronze and all of these things. And then we just follow up with, there's no one like the God of these people. So then we're moving on to the death of Moses. And so he gives all the 12 tribes all of these blessings. And then he's going to die. And so a couple things that I found interesting in this chapter was he goes up to the mountain. And so I looked up the mountain. The mountain's about 4,000 feet above sea level. That's pretty huge. And so he goes from the base of the mountain and he goes up the mountain. And as in my mind, as I'm reading this, in my mind, I'm thinking about it and I'm thinking how hard it would be. He's 120 years old, right? So he has all this to walk. But not soon after I actually read this, it says that even though he's dying, he is in perfect health. And so he's just like a younger person. And so it says Moses was 120 years old when he died, yet his eyes were not weak, nor his strength gone. So God miraculously kept him in utmost health. He kept him young. He was still able to go up on the mountain. And of course, when he got up there, he died. And then what I want to note is that obviously Moses dies, and yet the book keeps going. Not for much longer, right? A half of a chapter, whatever. But the book does keep going, which means if Moses was the original author, which I believe either Moses was or he spoke to somebody who wrote it down, Moses is no longer the author. And so what follows is it says, because Joshua takes over. Um, but what it says about Moses is it says in verse 10, it says, since then, no prophet has risen in Israel like Moses, whom the Lord knew face to face. So this leads me to believe that it is someone maybe even generations later, like it might not be immediately, like this just might have come generations from then. And so they were just kind of reminded that Moses was the ultimate prophet. And I think this is really telling about Moses because we're going to find later that all of these people really look up to Moses. Moses is one of the names. He's considered the law and the right part of the law. He's considered the law and the prophets. And this is kind of stuff that they quote all the time. And so Moses was someone they looked to as a king and as a leader, right? Like he was the ultimate in authority. He told them what to do. He told them how to be. He told them how to act. And so it says, obviously, that no one, or who knows how many generations after, has risen up like him. So the other main point that I want to focus on in this chapter is the idea of physical touch. This was sort of my first of my main points, is the idea of physical touch. And it comes up again and again. And, you know, sometimes we go forward, and there was a little bit of going back. All right, my son was messing around in the other room and he was making a ton of noise. Okay, so the idea of physical touch is that Moses lays his hands on Joshua. So he goes up into the mountain, and him and Joshua are, I want to say, essentially going to exchange places, but Joshua is going to take over. And so Moses lays his hands on Joshua. This is not the first time actually we've seen laying of hands. So there's references over and over about laying hands. In the future, we're going to see it as well. And so the reason I actually wanted to bring this up is because I am not a physical touch person. You know, there's like love languages where they say, oh, you know, you like gifts, or right. And some people like, or you like time, whatever it might be. And some people might like physical touch. In general, I am not that person. I do not like to hug. I do not like to be too close to somebody. I don't necessarily like to hold hands. I know I sound delightful, but those things are they're just they actually make me uncomfortable. And so even the idea of laying hands on to share power, to share wisdom, right? So it says he passes his wisdom on through the laying of hands. And so there's something to be said about the importance of physical touch. And I know they have all these studies that have come out, especially since COVID, right? Like, so COVID is a huge thing in my generation, and especially since COVID, when we separated so far from each other, and people recognized that people were getting sicker. They were having a lot of mental issues because of that, like so more anxiety, more depression, more like dementia was getting worse, like so things like that. And it was a lot of a lack of physical, like touching, being around other people. And so there's something to be said psychologically about recognizing that physical touch is very important, that it's in somehow ways that we connect as people. And then to see here that the actual, in some ways, the transfer of power is through touching someone. And just to think about how God has that connection through people as they're touching. And I know we hear about healings and things like that where people they pray for them by laying hands on them. And I know I've seen it, and I come from more of not necessarily completely, but more of a frozen chosen type style churches that I've always been to. And like even when they physically touch, it's kind of like they just like lay some fingers on shoulders, and it's not really intimate. Where it seems to me, this is a much more intimate, which it would be like God to be like that. That it is a much more intimate thing that they are doing by sharing. I mean, they've shared so much time together, right? If you remember, Joshua was actually up in the mountain with him, watching the mountain and being aware of all the people, while Moses was up and speaking with God. And so I think there's an intimateness to the two of them. And so I think that is helpful in their connection. And so in the way that he's able to share his wisdom and power with him. So I just think that for me, it's a big knock on the head that my aversion to physical touch isn't probably a good and godly thing. That maybe, and obviously I want to be careful. I know we all have our whatevers. Um, but I think physical intimacy is more important than we give it power to be. And in our generation and our time and where we live, we seem to separate more instead of coming together more in this more intimate way. And so maybe that's just something to think about as at least for me as I move on in the future. So I'm not handing out hugs to anyone who knows me. So we're not ready for that quite yet, but we never know what is down the future. Okay, so I just found that that was one of the things that I found fascinating, and I think that that is one of the things that's important. So anyway, Joshua winds up getting handed all the power, and this is how we end the book of Deuteronomy. So the book of Deuteronomy is over. I'm going to read that last sentence in verse 12. No one has ever shown the mighty power or performed the awesome deeds that Moses did in the sight of all Israel. So even we know as Joshua comes up, and although Joshua has taken over as their leader, he is not going to be as mighty and as powerful as Moses was. So he's still going to lead, but it's going to be different. All right, so we move on to Joshua 1. Starting in that first verse, it says, After the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord said to Joshua, son of Nun, Moses' aide, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now then, you and all these people get ready to cross the Jordan River into the land I'm about to give you, to the Israelites. So now he's saying, okay, the time has come. Moses has died. My dog is drinking water, of course, super loud. Moses has died, and now it's time. Everything has its time and place. Because that happened, now it's time for Joshua to get his people and to bring them up and to go over into the land. And he says, on a few occasions, be strong and courageous, because I'm sure it's fearful. There are big people in there, and nails it. Like they've been kind of sitting and biding their time, right, and waiting. But now it's time for them to get up and to go over there. So, flipping my notes. All right, so moving on to, I just want to read verse 4 in here. So I read verse 4. It says, your territory, just giving you a little bit of layout. Your territory is going to extend from the desert to Lebanon, and from the great river, the Euphrates, all the Hittite country, to the Mediterranean Sea in the west. Verse 5, no one will be able to stand against you all the days of your life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with you. This is my next point. It's going to be like super far-fetched, but bear with me. So my next point is his heart grew 3 sizes that day. So he says, be strong and courageous, because you will lead these people to inherit the land I swore to their ancestors to give them. So Joshua's leading them. This land has been given to them, right? Because he swore to give it to them. So Joshua's leading them. This land has been given to them by God. So it's both a gift that has been given, and it is also something that has to be taken, right? Gift given, God gives the gift, you have to take the gift, right? So growing your heart a little bit. My husband and I got into a fight. I feel like I say this kind of stuff all the time because it's just personal and it's just part of my life. My husband and I got into a fight. And in that fight, I did not think I was wrong. I thought I was right. But he also thought he was right. And I thought I'd be the bigger person. And I would say, I'm sorry. And I say in my head, I'm just going to take this bullet. I'm not really wrong, but I'm just going to take this bullet because that's what we're supposed to do. Sometimes we're just supposed to be the bigger person. And Jesus tells me I'm supposed to wash feet and write all these like good things, whatever. And so I go in and I apologize, and my apology is not accepted. And so then I'm a little bit irritated. And so it lasts a couple of days, whatever. And it wound up coming down that the truth of the matter is, and even as I tell you the story, my heart was not convinced that I was wrong. So when I apologized, it wasn't a genuine and sincere apology. And the truth is that he read through that. He knew that the apology wasn't sincere, because the truth is it wasn't sincere. My heart did not change at all. My heart was exactly the same when we got in that fight. My heart was like, well, I'm just going to be nice. And I think it felt like a sincere apology, because I was like, I'm just going to take it. I'm not going to be mad anymore. and I'm just going to kind of deal with whatever, it is. And, I'll just let him have this win, like whatever, no big deal. But it wound up just kind of like bubbling over into the point at the end where I was like, and I wasn't wrong, right? So, and he was like, I knew you didn't think you were wrong. So it was kind of a funny thing that wound up coming out about it. But because my heart didn't change, my apology was insincere. And you're probably thinking to yourself, what on earth does this have to do with giving and taking? Every day we accept, and obviously the very first time when we first believed, this was a gift that was given because God is just good and he loves his people, right? And so he gave that gift. And then one day I believed that gift and I accepted that gift, right? How was my heart when I accepted that gift? Did I believe I deserved the gift, that it was a gift, or did I think that it was just something that I did that I should have gotten this gift? Right? So this is where I'm going with this. Um, so for me, I was like, oh, I understand the story. And so now that I understand the story, I kind of like deserve the gift or whatever. But a lot of times, and even once we believe, right, we think we deserve forgiveness and we deserve all of these things, just because, right? Because, well, I did extra penance that day, or I tithed more this week, and I'm generally a really good person, and so I don't do too much bad stuff, right? Like there in our heads, we are so warped. And this is, I don't, we're, if this is the best of us, we are so warped that we forget that it is an undeserved gift. There is nothing I did to be born where I'm born. There is nothing I did to have the brain power that I have. And you can be like, well, I did my homework, I studied. I mean, those A's, I really, really deserve those A's. And so then my heart starts to harden towards the gift of good grades that I've been given, right? I'm not sure why I'm using grades because I'm a full grown adult that doesn't get grades, but I work in a school, so maybe that's why. Or like I got a raise at work and it's because I worked really, really hard. I want to be very clear. I am not taking away the fact that some people work and some people don't. That's the truth, right? Like I don't want to take anything away from that fact. However, we work because God has given us so much. We don't work to get what God has given us because then we don't recognize the gift that we have been given, right? So I want to say that because he says to Joshua, so our hearts need to grow. Our hearts need to recognize these people are going to come into this land and eventually they're going to think that that land is theirs and that they did something to get it. Well, we went to war and so we got it. We followed Joshua in and so we deserve this land, right? Like what big deal. That is not the case here, there, or anywhere, like anywhere in your life. That is not the case. This is a gift that is wholeheartedly given. Your heart needs to open to the fact and it needs to continue because it hardens like this. It solids right back up again and it deceives you, right? And so we constantly think, well, it wasn't that bad. I didn't do anything that wrong, or I said I was sorry. We need to come to the plate fully and completely understanding that what we have done is nothing to God. And it is not, that's not why he gave Jesus to us. That is not why he had Jesus take his sins and rose Jesus again. That's not why he did any of that. It's because he loved us, because he created us. And so our hearts need to grow in order to recognize that. And it is a continual process. There is no time where you kick back, which I've probably said this a million times also. I know I'm pretty repetitive, but there's never a time where you kick back and say, I've made it, I've hit it, I'm good enough. The second you do that, you need to start working on your heart all over again and saying, I didn't make it. I didn't do anything. Even when I'm doing these things, it's not because I'm so amazing. It's because God is so amazing. And so it's just this idea of growing our hearts because God gave this to you already. You need to go in and take it with a right heart. You need to go in and recognize that this land was not theirs and they're doing nothing to earn this land. And again, I know I kind of hit on that a little bit, but I feel like it's to hit home. It needs to be really personal, right? It needs to resonate inside of what you do. Do you come to the plate and say, I don't need forgiveness, right? I know I lied to that person, but I don't need forgiveness for that. Like, it's not that big of a deal. It is a big deal. It is something that we need to humble our hearts to the Lord about. I know I got angry. I know I called them a name. I know I said that I was a faithful person while gossiping the entire time. These are things that pull our hearts away. And these are reasons that you go, that's a gift that I really didn't deserve. Okay. So we just want to recognize the gift that has been given us. So that's my second point. Heart grew 3 sizes. That's my second point. All right. So moving on a little bit from there, I'm going to move down to my third point, which is in the second part of Joshua. This is so this is a story that I think maybe we've heard a lot of times, but I think this is a really great story. So Joshua sends people into the which they've actually done another time, but Joshua sends people into the land just to kind of check it out, right? So he sends these 2 guys into the land. I want you to go in. I want you to check it out. These guys go in the land and they immediately meet this prostitute and they go actually into her house, and she hides them. And so, because they're trying to check out the land, and somehow the king finds out that she had these people at her house, and the king comes down and he says, "Hey, I know these spies were at your place." And she said, "Oh yeah. They went out and they left already, and you should send people to go look for them." And then she hid them in her house, and then eventually asks favor for that, but she hid them in her house. And one of the reasons that she hid them in her house is because she recognizes who God is. So because of all the things that have been done, and this is another awesome, because of all the parting of the Red Sea, right? She says, we're scared of your God. We heard about your God and we're scared. And if you remember, God said, this is why he's done those things. He did those things so that he would show the rest of the world who he is. And now they're recognizing it. So these people are living in the land of Canaan. They're not submitting to it, right? They're not going, okay, he's our God. We were so silly. I can't believe we didn't know it before. But they're like, no, now we're afraid because they're going to come in and they're going to take over us. So that's why they were trying to get the people out of this, out of the town, because they didn't want them to look around and see, where their weak points were or anything like that. So they were trying to get them out. But Rahab lied. And this is, I know I've definitely mentioned this before because this happened with Moses's midwives. But the midwives were lying to the pharaohs, if you remember a few chapters back. And so this lying gets me. Like, we're not supposed to lie. And I have set my heart on knowing a black and white rule that lying is bad. If you lie to people, it hurts people and it is bad. Lying is against right. You don't give false testimony, which is something I definitely misunderstood because I was thinking false testimony is lie. Do not lie. And that's not necessarily what it means. And so just I think yesterday, a couple of days ago, we were discussing with some family and friends, what does it mean to do the things that God asks you to do? And I'm getting to this point where I'm like, my lines are off. My black and white is no longer black and white. Don't get angry. Well, yes, but no. Don't lie. Well, yes, but no. Because I've seen 2 examples at this point about people who lied, but they lied to protect God's people. And so the lie was in the effort of loving God and then loving people because they loved God. And so I'm not saying there aren't some general black and whites. I know that we want to stick with those general black and whites, right? Like, what does it mean to be a good person? I know general black and whites are helpful, but we really need to give stuff over to God. we really need to, and she knew. So it's just funny because she didn't need to even sit and pray about it, right? She saw them and put them in her house because she recognized God. So it wasn't even a matter of like, oh, I'm not sure if I should, be dishonest or not. It was a matter of like, I need to protect God's people because I know who God is. And you know what I want? I want God to protect me. So she says to him, can you protect me and my family? And he said, yeah, do these three things. And as long as you do these three things, then, I think it was like throw the rope out the window, make sure that they're all inside. So make sure as long as they're inside the house, then they won't have death and destruction because that's going to be all outside of the houses. So that the cord was supposed to be hanging out the window so they would know that that's her place and that the people are inside there, not to go in there. And so he tells you, follow these things. If you don't follow these things, right? So here we go again, black and white for her. If you don't follow these things, then you're probably going to die. We won't be able to protect you, but we want you to follow those things. But she knew to be dishonest to those people so she could be with God. And that's where I think uh, if we're going to have shades of gray, those shades of gray should always and forever be pointing to God. And I don't want to encourage shades of gray. I don't want to encourage like that it's not black and white. And yeah, you can just lie all day long, but tell yourself. This is not about telling yourself. It's not about lying. It's not about using scripture to fill in the blanks of any kind of manipulation that you're doing. This is all about putting God first in all things. That's how I'm ending today because it's a hard note. I think sometimes we fumble and I think that's okay too. But this is a hard lesson to learn, especially for those of us. The more I get in it, the more I want to see the things that people did. And so I want to follow those rules and guidelines. And I just think we need to be wary of rules and guidelines um, when it comes to certain things. So if your rule and your guideline in some way, shape, or form doesn't make God the most important thing on your list, then that's not the right rule. And I even shudder saying that because rules are important too, because God creates rules out of chaos. So there we are. I might have left you with more questions than with answers, but that is the end of today. So we went into the book of Joshua today. So we finished another book, which is so exciting, right? One more down, a few more to go, but one more down. And I hope you guys are reading along with me. And as always, I say, I want you to read first before you listen so you get the gist of everything that's going on as well. And then this is just kind of an extra for you to maybe get a little more flavor out of that. So if you liked this today, I want you to hit the like button. I want you to share this with as many people as possible. I want you to subscribe to the channel so it continues to pop up for you and keep reading. I'll see you next time.